It is 2 o'clock, so our next speaker is Andy Thompson. Andy, the man has great taste, I gotta say. 90s grunge music aficionado, which is, of course, the finest music ever made by man. Hacker InfoSec consultant, works with Fortune 500 companies to improve their security posture. So he is either traveling or sleeping when he is not working, and he'll tell you more about himself. So, our 2 o'clock speaker, Andy Thompson.
Hello. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me talk today about Kerberos attacks, in particular, the golden ticket. Just wanted to demonstrate that I do listen to people on Twitter, so ask and you shall receive. So I'm going to start off our talk with a little bit of a story, okay? Imagine February 2016 in Manila, Philippines. A gentleman walks up to a very crowded casino's counter, makes a withdrawal request. They take a look at the data. It, all checks out. It's a large amount, but, it's legit. They end up loading up the suitcase full of a large sum of money. And then the gentleman just disappears into the night, never to be seen again. Over 6,000 miles away in Bangladesh, the Central Bank of Bangladesh has just been robbed for $81 million. To date, this is the largest bank heist in the history of the world. And this was all done via the internet. And unfortunately, this gentleman right here, Atur Rahman, central governor of the Bank of Bangladesh, ended up having to take the fall for it. Due to his lax cybersecurity controls, his bank was the victim of, again, the largest bank heist in history. This is just one of many different cyber attacks against the SWIFT network. This is just the one that had the biggest notoriety. What actually happened in the course of this attack was pretty interesting. It was a large amount of bank transactions, 26 to be exact, totaling $951 million. 26 were actually in transit at the time in which the fifth transaction going to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York was caught. What happened was there was a typo. The word foundation was actually misspelled. It was misspelled like fundantian. And that's what the visual typo detection, a human being was the one that detected this sort of circumstance. So with that, let me introduce myself. My name is Andy Thompson. I probably have the coolest job in the entire world. I'm the strategic advisor for CyberArk Software. What I get to do is I get to help customers leverage the product that they already bought and just use it to the fullest extent. So it's a really great job. I get to help people, right? I have a degree from the University of Texas at Arlington in Management Information Systems, CompTIA A+, Security Plus, SSCP and CISSP from ISC Squared, and I recently got my GIAC G-Pen. I'm a member of their advisory board, and I'm now one of the SANS mentors, so very excited about that. I'm happily married, and I have 2 little girls at home, and I come from Dallas, Texas, and so I'm really active in the information security community out there. Right now, I'm a member of the Shadow Systems Hacker Collective, as well as one of the members of the Dallas Hackers Association. Most people think, Andy, you're the hacker in the family. Well, honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. The real hacker in my family is my wife. She's what's called a travel hacker, okay? She does some really cool stuff. What she does is she goes in and finds like price variations on websites and things like that, and if they are within a certain deviation, then she'll send like push notifications to get updates on error fares. This is us in Alaska on some glacier. Just got back from Australia last year. The 4 of us went there for like $1,200, and I think in a couple of weeks we're going to Easter Island. All 4 of us for like $900. It's so awesome having a travel hacker in the family. And then we've got her little doppelganger. This is Kinley. She's exactly like her mom. She likes to run just like her mom. She's an artist just like her mom. She likes to bug her dad about doing the dishes just like her mom. So yeah, that's Kinley. And then I've got my little doppelganger, Charlotte. Now, you know how a lot of kids like go to sleep with like a teddy bear? No, not Charlotte. This is Typey, her keyboard. She's a chip off the old block. So before I go into further detail, I want to give a couple of shout outs. First off, Dallas Hackers Association, DC 214, North Texas Cybersecurity Group, and the North Texas ISSA chapters. All great people. Specifically, Mr. TJ Adams and Len No from CyberArk. TJ's here in the building today, and just my team, Customer Success. And then, most importantly, we couldn't be doing this demonstration without the people that developed the PowerShell Empire exploitation framework. So Harmjoy, SixDub, Enigma, Reverse Shell, Killswitch, and Warrior. All these guys are contributors of this PowerShell Empire framework. We couldn't do this again without him. So we're going to give you a rundown of what this talk is today. And I'm really excited about this talk because it's really kind of purple, okay? We're going to start it off with the red team side. We're going to actually demonstrate from soup to nuts an entire golden ticket attack. Then we're going to follow it up with the second part, the blue side of this talk. And then that way we're going to talk about identity access management best practices and demonstrate how each one of the controls could be put in to thwart the attack that we previously demonstrated. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A, and then whatever you choose to do after that is up to you. So we're going to talk about a golden ticket attack, okay? What this whole thing is, again, a proof of concept I did in my lab, and with open source, PowerShell Empire, Mimikatz, whatnot, we're able to do this golden ticket attack. It took realistically about 6 minutes. It would have been a lot faster if I used tab autocomplete. I'm a terrible typist. So some more warnings ahead of time here. These are the disclaimers. One, the attack that I'm actually going to demonstrate in my lab didn't actually happen like this in real life. In reality, we actually determined there were 3 different APT players in the Central Bank of Bangladesh when this went down. Not only was it this particular Asian crime syndicate, but the North Koreans and the Iranians were both in the same network at the same time. Just the fact that the Asian crime syndicate was the first one to pull the trigger is what made it so notable. The second part is there's more than one way to skin a cat here in this attack. I use PowerShell Empire. Metasploit's a great exploitation framework, and it does the exact same thing. But even deeper, there are so many different functions that we could have run, even just in the same exploitation framework, that could have done things in a little bit better manner. User Hunter, for example, is an amazingly powerful function in PowerShell Empire. However, it didn't work in my lab. So again, there's more than one way to go about accomplishing the end goal here. And then lastly, I'm sorry to tell you, we're not dropping any 0 days. There's no elite hacks going on. This is all simple, simple stuff. I guarantee there's a YouTube video with a notepad and crappy techno music that's going to demonstrate the same thing I'm talking to you guys about today. In fact, I've often joked that this is so easy you can be a 400-pound hacker in your parents' basement to do this, okay? All right, so we're going to talk today about Kerberos attacks, all right? I'm going to need some volunteers today to demonstrate what this golden ticket attack actually looks like. So can I have a raise of hands? Otherwise, I'm going to pick you. Okay, you're in the front row. I'm sorry, you're going to have to be one of them if you don't mind. All I need you to do is just read this really, really loud, okay? You are, let's see, the client, domain controller. Here you go, here's another one. And then pass this back to somebody one row back there. All right, oh, who's the user, or domain controller? Raise your hand if you're the domain controller. All right, so I got some tickets for you. All right, you are going to be responsible for giving these out. All right, so go ahead. Who's the regular user? Should be highlighted. All right, so go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bob. I want to access a file on the file server. Hey Bob, what's your password? My password is BSides, Cincinnati is awesome. Your password is good, very good. Get your ticket.
All right, so the domain controller has authenticated the user and is giving him a ticket. And that ticket is the key thing here. That's the implied trust. All right, go ahead.
Hi, file server. I'm Bob, and I want to access the file. Here's my ticket.
All right.
Hey, you've got a ticket, so that means domain controller says you're good. Here's your file.
All right, good. Give everybody my hand. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right, so you guys saw what the Kerberos is in its like pure essence, okay? We're about to do, again, a golden ticket attack. And it's going to look something like this. Woo! That's right. Thank you, TJ. So we're going to hijack the Kerberos process. That's what we're going to do today. What this is just part of the advanced targeted attack. Well, what is an advanced targeted attack, you ask? Well, it's actually kind of simple. It just means that they have a targeted attack in which they've got in your organization for a long, extensive period of time. These attackers know your networks better than your sysadmins do. That's how long they've been in your organization. This is in direct contrast to the other types of attacks that we see in our playfield today. The standard attacks that we're seeing most often are denial of service attacks, standard DDoS, followed by opportunistic endpoint attacks, aka malware and ransomware, and then followed by what we call our quick targeted attacks. These are the gentlemen calling from Microsoft with very thick accents trying to do something on your computer. Those are the quick targeted attacks. They go in, they attack, they get out, and they're done. They move on to the next guy. We're going to talk now about the phases of this advanced targeted attack. And what you're going to notice here is something very, very similar to, well, standard penetration tests, just about everything. The only difference between an APT targeted attack phase versus anything else is just the length of runway. Again, a pen test engagement, red team, they may be doing their engagement for 2-3 weeks. Well, an advanced target attack may be doing this for 2-3 years, okay? So again, these phases are still the same. And this is like pen tester 101 stuff here. First phase, open source intelligence gathering, external recon, okay? Followed by the actual breach, the actual foothold into the network. And we'll demonstrate that as part of the demo. The next phase is the internal reconnaissance. We'll go into this in a bit of detail further, but really kind of learning more about the network, learning more about the users, and how far you can extend your access to. The next phase is the lateral movement phase. This is the part where we're trying to extend the breadth of our access, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to find out who has the access we need to get. We go laterally move to that machine, and then we extend our control by getting those credentials. The next phase is really where the golden ticket attack comes in. This is the domain compromise. This is where we establish permanent persistence on the network. The last phase, once we've established our foothold in the entire organization, we can do anything we want. It's time to move to our end game. And depending on what your motives are will depend on what your end game actually is. We could be corrupting data. We could be causing a complete denial of service. It just depends on, again, what your end game is. So, oh, what is that? Oh, crap. Does anybody have any Bitcoin? Okay, well. All right, so let's start off with the breach, okay? This is what we're going to do. We're going to move over to our demo. Again, I flew in from Dallas last night, and TSA really hates sacrificial animals in your carry-on, so this is a recorded demo. Let's see here. So again, what we're using today is just PowerShell Empire. It's got the built-in functions with Mimikatz that loaded into memory, and that's all we need. So what we were able to do is we were able to create a malicious Excel document with a macro. A standard user with local admin permissions opens up the Excel document, and away we go. What you'll see on the C2 server is an agent has connected. Now we have shell access as that user. It's pretty cool. Anything you want to do, you can do it from this shell here. So now what we need to do is elevate our privileges. And there's a really great command called bypass UAC, and it does just that. Bypasses the UAC. We click that, we press execute, and a new shell connects. This is a new shell that has that bypassed UAC permissions, and we can extend our command functionality. So we can do more with that shell, which really kind of leads to the next phase of the attack. And let's see here. So yeah, the next phase is we're now interfacing with that new shell. And that leads us to move on to the next phase of this attack. And that's really internal reconnaissance here. What we want to do is we want to find what computers exist on the network, who's logged onto those machines, and what kind of privileges I can get. I know this is a bit of a side note, but if you get a chance, Phineas Fisher did a write-up on his breach of hacking team. And he explicitly said that the sysadmins, the people with the access, are the people that he goes after. And that's what pen testers, black hats, they all want to go after the people with the keys to the kingdom. And so that's what we're going to do in this attack. We're going to go try to find a domain admin and see what we can do and what we can do with their creds, okay? So let's jump back into the shell. Let's see here. So the reconnaissance phase is consisting of just a few commands. And again, there's multiple ways, different commands that we could have run here. But the first thing that we're going to do is we want to see who those privileged users are, okay? There's a function, very simple. It's called get group members. So again, I'm a terrible typer. Tab autocomplete saved me here. Find, let's see, get group members. One of the properties that we can define is what security group. We can take any security group we want and press execute, and we're provided with a list. I decided we wanted to see who the domain admins were, okay? So you press execute, and then you're provided with a list. Any user with read-only permissions to Active Directory can facilitate this level of reconnaissance. You don't have to be a domain admin to just read these sort of objects. So we find there's 2 domain admins on this very small demo. The next command that we're going to run is simply put get computer. We want to find the computer objects that are on Active Directory. Again, this is a very small demo, but you can see that there are just a handful of servers here. What we're going to be interested in is 2 servers. The Swift server, which is completely locked down. Nobody can get into it. But there's another one, this file server. From a pen tester's perspective, file servers, print servers tend to have deviated permissions as compared to other application servers. So that one will be an interesting one we want to check out. So let's do that. Let's find the get local group, define that particular file server, and say, let's find out who the local admins are on that box, okay? Again, we press execute, and we're presented with a list of the local administrators on that file server. Again, all with read-only rights. Just happens that the standard user that we originally compromised happens to be also a local admin on that box. How convenient, right? That means that conceivably we could pivot to that box using the account we already have. The next thing that we're going to run is a command called get logged on. What do you think that does, right? We find out who's actually logged on to that file server. So again, we define that we want to know who's logged on to that file server right now. We press execute, and we're provided with a list. Hey, look at that. A domain admin happens to be logged onto that machine. Meaning that if we're able to dump creds off of that file server, we can get that domain admin's creds. Pretty interesting, huh? That leads us to the next phase of this attack. This is the lateral movement phase. What we're going to do here is we're going to move, now that we think that we have access to, we're going to move over to that file server. Then we're going to use Mimikatz to load into memory. It's not going to write on disk, so signature-based AV is not going to be able to detect this. And we're going to be able to dump the creds off that file server, okay? Once we do that, oh, it gets fun after that. So let's jump back over to the shell and get that domain admin cred. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to interface with the elevated UAC command. We're going to do this, we're going to insert some command line code. It's encoded. There's different ways to do this, WMI, PSExec, PSRemoting, you name it. But I just chose to do the invoke command with some encoded strings. It sends that command to the file server. We press execute or enter. And then what you'll see right here is a new shell is going to connect to our system. That is the new shell on our print server. So now we've successfully completed the lateral movement. We're going to jump onto that particular shell and demonstrate that we are actually that machine. So we're going to do a host name, and we're going to see that we are indeed on the file server. Great. But we were on a who am I, and we still see, hey, we're still the standard user. We haven't become that domain admin, right? So that leads us to the next phase. We'll run the creds command and just demonstrate that, oh, we got to get back into our shell, sorry. We're going to jump back onto the file server, run the creds command to demonstrate there's no passwords in this file right here. However, we run Mimikatz, puts it into memory, and we're provided with hashes and clear text of all our passwords. Let me in. One is our domain admin password, but we also have his hash. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pass the hash, and we're going to do this all again within PowerShell. We steal that token of the PID from cmd.exe running as the domain admin, and we have officially passed the hash. We have become the domain administrator. Anything that domain admin can do, we now have the capacity to do, which leads us to the next phase. We've established the level of permissions that we want to execute our in-game. Let's now establish permanent persistency. That's such a hard word to say, permanent persistency. Try it. So here's the one caveat to this that I found out, that there is a way to recover from a golden ticket attack. It is extremely, extremely difficult to do. In most enterprise organizations, it's almost so difficult that you really can't do it, due to the fact you have to have everything lined up perfectly. You have to have the synchronization between your Active Directory domain controllers in a particular way that you don't cause a storm once you do it. It's called a double tap. But it's nearly impossible to do. But we're going to go ahead and execute this golden ticket attack. The whole key to this is stealing. Remember how we got those tickets in our little demo earlier? We want to take control of the ticket generation. Once we take control of the ticket generation, that is the golden ticket attack. So what we're going to do is get this KBRTGT hash. And once we do that, then we'll start issuing our own tickets, okay? And then we're going to go execute our in-game. We're going to go play around with that Swift server. All right, so let's go back to the demo and show you how it works. So the first thing we want to do is get back into that shell. We're running as the domain admin, And we're going to do what's called a DC sync. This is a command that's run when new domain controllers are stood up. They reach out to another domain controller and say, hey, I'm a new domain admin. I need you to send me the hashes. We're only concerned about the KBRTGT hash, so we specify that. So again, we do the DC sync, and then now we're provided with the KBRTGT hash. There it is right there. Now we can do anything with that KBRTGT hash. Within PowerShell Empire, there's a very simple function called golden ticket. Now that we have the KBRTGT hash, we define a couple values. We can define how long we want to have access, the life of that golden ticket, the name of it, you name it. So again, I'm going to create one called Hack the Planet. Yes, I was watching an old movie that night. And we press execute, and then we're provided with a golden ticket, a single golden ticket that has 10 years of life that can do anything it wants to do on that network. At this point, we've officially owned the network. So now it's a matter of actually executing our end game. Remember that machine that we couldn't get to, that Swift server I told you about? Well, there's just all the file contents right there. Now it's time to move forward to the end game, okay? What we're going to do is, again, we're going to access the Swift server, and rather than shut it down or do something like that, we're going to corrupt the data. Well, we're not going to corrupt it to the point where it becomes unusable. We're just going to corrupt it to the point where I get about $50,000 richer. So this is what it looks like when we go back to the demo. We're going to take a look at the Windows side of this, all right? So the Swift server may be a Windows box, and you can just see all the jobs that are queued up in that particular folder. Every 5 minutes, the transactions will then be processed. So we're going to just go in and manipulate some of that data. So instead of sending $100,000 someplace, we're going to send $50,000 to the Shadow Systems group. It's just a matter of uploading the file. We've circumvented any sort of manual controls, any visible oversight. We have a legitimate file in the system. It's going to process just as any other batch job would. So again, the attack is completed, and there we are. We've got a transaction file in the system for $50,000. Congratulations, the golden ticket attack has been completed. End game is done. We are all set. That is the entire golden ticket attack. There's just one last thing that we have to do. It's profit. So that is the golden ticket attack in its purest form. That's the red team side of this talk. Let's kind of go flip it upside down and talk about how we can go ahead and prevent these sort of attacks, okay? We're going to talk about it from a perspective of identity access management and how we can go about correcting all the mistakes that we saw as part of this previous demo. The first thing we want to talk about is endpoint privilege, okay? Least privilege is critical in preventing this entire situation. If we were unable to get that UAC elevated access, none of the reconnaissance, none of the pivoting, none of the additional payloads would have been able to be injected into the system. So again, what we need to do is remove local administrator rights from the end user. The next thing that we want to do is allow applications to run that need access to run local administrator. So again, we want to revoke local administrator access from all of our end users, but again, allow certain applications. I used to be in the medical industry, and applications like Cerner and Meditech, they had to be local admin to run, but I didn't want to give the nurses or anybody else admin access to run that on the entire operating system. So with least privilege applications, we can elevate just those particular binaries, but leave the underlying operating system running at a standard user state. The next thing we want to do is application control, manage application access. We want to block unauthorized applications. And we talked earlier about Avecto and some of the other different products out there. One that I work for CyberArk, so we have one that's called Endpoint Privilege Management that does a very good job at this. But again, we want to block unauthorized applications, but again, allow others through. This is a nightmare if you're actually trying to manage this, if you have just two buckets to run from. Basically, explicit allow and explicit deny. That's very difficult to actually do. So we've started a concept of a gray listing, have a third bucket that will allow unknown hashes, unknown binaries to run in a constrained way. So for example, let's say WannaCry, let's say it, or any other ransomware for that matter. We can say, well, first off, that binary can't run, but we can say, well, let's let it run, but you can't reach back out to the internet. That prevents the encryption key exchange. It prevents geolocation. It's very powerful. But then we can say, okay, you can reach out to the internet. It may be a legitimate application, but you can't write to the file system. Or we can say, yeah, you can write to the file system, but you can only write to this directory or this particular file extension. Really cool stuff which you can do there. Now, this isn't really a identity access management control, but I figured I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. I think network segmentation is huge, okay? It really kind of isolates your keys to the kingdom, your tier 0 assets. The real things that you value, if you can segment them and make them difficult to pivot to, then attackers have that much of a harder time. So again, if we had network segmentation in the previous demo, we wouldn't have been easily able to pivot using standard protocols. So again, network segmentation prevents lateral movement. But how do you use your systems in a segmented environment? Well, this is where I think privileged jump servers or bastion hosts come into play. Microsoft has a white paper called the Red Forest that talks about how this should be done with basically a second laptop or second system to be used for just administrative use. Well, that's kind of pricey, you know? So this is why I think jump servers are very valuable and that you can route all your privileged access through that particular type of server. But at the same time, think about it this way. You can't pass the hash if you can't get the hash, okay? So if you're on a machine, you are logging in, your hash or the privileged hash exists on that machine. See how we did the Mimikatz and we were able to dump the creds of the people that were logged on? Well, if we route all our traffic through a jump host, it doesn't matter. That jump host doesn't go home on the weekend and get, ransomware or, Trojanized Minecraft from your kids. You have a very locked down bastion host, and all those privileged hashes will be stored on that machine rather than on your endpoints that you can't vouch for 100% of the time. And what it also does is allows for accounting and auditing. If we have a video or session recording session of what's all happening on that jump box, not only do you know who used that credential and when, but you know exactly what's being done with that account. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But let's move forward on another control that I highly recommend. It's credentials. Well, no duh, right? Well, there's 3 main tenets to a really, really strong credential. And what I recommend is locking that down. You want to secure and manage all your privileged credentials in your organization. So it's not just the local administrator account. Microsoft has done a very good job trying to prevent pass the hash from local systems, but domain accounts are still easily available to abuse for pass the hash. So again, Microsoft has been able to lock down passing the hash just to local accounts with the exception of the RID 500, that local administrator account. So that local admin account can still be used for pass the hash. Any domain account can still be used for pass the hash. So here's 3 recommendations for a secure password. There's 3 main tenets to it. The first one is unique passwords, okay? You can't pass the hash if the hash is different on each individual system. Okay, very simple, very easy enough to do if you've got some sort of automated process for that. The next thing you want is a complex password. Well, the reason for that is fairly simple, to defeat brute forcing, okay? So which leads me to the next tenet, okay? So let's say hypothetically we have a password. It takes about 1 month to brute force and crack, okay? Well, with ever-changing, frequently rotating passwords, that circumvents that. So for example, if I have a password that's set to change once a week automatically, and it takes 1 month to brute force, by the time that account is brute force cracked, that password's already changed 3 times. So that's why you want to have those 3 main components to a secure password. But in addition to credentials, what I recommend is a second form of credential, multi-factor. Multi-factor is critical to truly tie the person using the credential to the credential that's actually being used. And then what we're going to talk about is what to do with these credentials. This is a concept that I like to call credential boundaries. And again, Microsoft has a white paper on how to prevent credential theft using this particular concept, okay? It's very much so what I call the horizontal tiered boundary. And it looks something like this. All right. So what you have here is you've got your tier 0 assets. This is what correlates to your first phase of your disaster recovery program. These are the end things that your organization truly values. So forest admins, domain controllers, DNS, ESXi hosts, really the critical components to your infrastructure. So if you have like a SIEM that can monitor credential use and say, all right, the domain admin accounts can only operate within this particular tier. If it's found in the subsequent lower tiers, such as the tier 1 tier or application server tier, you've got an issue, you've got an indication of compromise, and start your incident response program. So again, here's our tier 1 asset. This is your standard application servers, database servers, really the core of your organization, right? Fair enough. Again, your server admins will only operate within that horizontal boundary. If you ever find a server admin up here or down below on your tier 2 tier, you've got an indicator, okay? Leads me to tier 2. These are your workstations. These are your endpoints. This is where help desk operates. This is where you kind of have your lowered access. You don't find a lot of privileged accounts in your tier 0 outside of local administrators and maybe a help desk account. So again, if you find a help desk account existing up on tier 1, you've got something to look into. So here's a key concept, and I want you guys to write this down if you can, because this is a major takeaway from this entire talk, okay? Identities. Identities are flesh and blood. You, me, everybody in this room, okay? These are passwords, accounts. They're just hexadecimal that defines permissions. These are not one and the same. You don't have to have a one-to-one relationship to delineate permission, okay? Think about it like this, a construction site. Any construction site you go to, you got a ton of people, right? But does every single person have a hammer? Maybe. What about a skill saw? Maybe not. What about a bulldozer? Should everybody in a construction site need a bulldozer? Because they might need it at any given point, right? No, that's just not cost effective. What you have instead is a toolbox. What you have is somebody is assigning somebody to do a job. They go to the chest, they check out the tool to do their job, they do their job, and then they put the tool back in. Because at the end of the day, somebody goes in and accounts for all the tools to make sure they're all still in the box. That is a way to run a very ship-shape construction site. And I recommend trying to do something similar to that in your IT organization. So think about it like this, okay? Here are 5 sysadmins, standard users, okay? What we've seen is a lot of organizations have moved to this program of creating a second account, the second ADM or bang account or whatever you call it, that separates the permission out, okay? How many people, show of hands, have something like this in your organization currently? There's a lot of people, okay? So what you've just done is you've done a really good thing by breaking out the privilege from your standard regular user account. But what you just did also is double your footprint of accounts in your organization. So look at it from this perspective. Somebody, maybe a sysadmin, goes rogue. They get let go. HR files the termination papers and their standard user account's disabled. Well, there's so many workflows, and unless you have a really robust IAM program, that ADM account may still exist. We actually saw this something similar to this actually happened at Columbia, the sportswear company. Someone was let go. They were able to take an existing account, elevate the permissions, and create a backdoor. And they were able to access the organization after they left over 700 times in order to get a competitive advantage. That sort of thing should never happen. But that case is currently in litigation currently. Here's what I recommend, okay? We're going to still have our same 5 standard users, okay? We got to have sysadmins, right? But rather than create 5 separate accounts, we're going to have 1, or maybe 2 if you have a certain use case for it, but you want to have a locked down administrative functional account that's managed within some sort of automatic password system. So what you're essentially doing is you're going from 5 privileged accounts down to 1 locked down solid rock and roll privileged account. Okay, so that's what we try to recommend from a functional account model. So this is kind of what the whole thing looks like when you put it all together. This is what a standard network would look like. Very flat. Any credential could access any one of those machines, even though you've got clearly defined roles and functions on this whole network. It also looks like a flat network from a networking perspective, right? Well, let's try it like this. Not only are we implementing the horizontal boundaries that I talked about earlier, but we're also having those functional accounts. So now you're delineating them horizontally and vertically as well. So this is what you see with credential boundaries and functional accounts. You slap on some least privilege and application control on top of it, that is a secure, stinking network right there. So one of the latter things that we kind of touched on earlier was, privilege jump boxes and where they can be of value and risk mitigation to your organization. The part of that is also monitoring. I think monitoring is huge because you can monitor the privilege access. And it's not just your sysadmins. It very well may be third parties as well. We know from the Target breach, it wasn't Target that was initially compromised. It was a third-party HVAC vendor. And if we were able to, or if they were able to provide some sort of protection of their own organization and route the HVAC vendor through some sort of proxy server, then they wouldn't have been able to inject their code into the network. So again, I think there's some value in that as well. The other thing is alerting. If we are able to see malicious activities go down on your network through like a network tap, we could detect certain indicators. We've seen that previously in some of our previous other talks. But things like the DC sync would be very easily picked up if you have any sort of alerting. And then also just picking up on behavior anomalies. Well, what is that? Well, that's really heuristic behavior, okay? We can actually say, you know, a standard user is logging on Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 and 5. Well, there's another, that same user, logged on legitimately, but they're coming in from a Chinese IP address, coming from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Saturday, which correlates to a typical Chinese workday, by the way. Those sort of things, even using legitimate credentials, based on the heuristic behavior, we can detect alerts on anomalies that may need investigation. And that's really where I see value in sort of monitoring of your users through heuristic behavior analysis. And then what this also does is alerts when there are events outside of your identity access management control system. So for example, if you've got all your passwords locked down in a vault and you have to check them in and check them out, and there's a logon event that happens on some application server, but there's not a correlating event on your file or your password vault, somebody's circumvented your controls. We can take immediate action and rotate that password like immediately. So I think there's value in that as well. So to kind of conclude, there's really 4 main tiers of controls that I would recommend to lock down your organization from an identity access management perspective. First is from the endpoint, really removing local privilege and application control. I can't speak highly enough on application control and these privilege. You guys saw WannaCry, you've guys seen all the stuff that's gone down on ransomware. Well, it's not me saying this, okay? It's US CERT and FBI. The combination of least privilege and application control absolutely will defeat ransomware. The next thing is really, again, not necessarily an IAM control, but I think network segmentation is a huge control that needs to be put into place. Routing access through jump servers. I think, again, that's huge. Really kind of holding your users and your third parties accountable is critical. Enforcing credential tiers. Remember, this is not just horizontal, but also vertical. So the combination of credential boundaries and functional accounts is huge. The 3 tenets, again, of a password, unique, frequently changing, and complex passwords, huge. Multi-factor authentication, really kind of taking it up to the next level and truly identifying the person is the one that you're authenticating, not just some random person. Setting alerts, monitoring behavior, and monitoring privileged user access. Again, all critical components from an identity access management perspective on preventing advanced targeted attacks. Well, that concludes my talk. I'm going to open this up to some Q&A if you have. I will be here for about the next couple hours, and I got to bounce back over to Dallas. But again, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.